After Show with TelecomTV's Guy Daniels and Ray Maistre.
Welcome back to TelecomTV Spotlight on 5G and the long-awaited return of the After Show. I'm Guy Daniels and this is the final programme for this year's Spotlight on 5G series as we review last week's MWC Barcelona event. And it's your one and only opportunity this year to send in your comments, thoughts and questions about all things 5G. Now, in our preview show a couple of weeks ago, we identified 4 topics that we hoped to see explored at MWC, and we'll be revisiting these during the course of this show. We'll hear the thoughts of our special guests, plus we do want to hear from you. So please get in touch by using the form on the website. Of course, it wouldn't be the After Show without my colleague Ray Maistre, freshly rested after the excesses of MWC. Glad to be back, Ray?
Excesses? I don't know what you're talking about, Guy. Well, to be honest, I could have done with a little bit more time at the show, but always glad to be home, of course, for a 48-hour sleep. But there are so many people to meet and talk to at Mobile World Congress, and that's the real strength of the show and why it's important to see it back and well attended again. It's about meeting people, the ones you already know, and importantly, making new contacts. And as we all know, that was really hard to do well during the pandemic years. As for the show itself, it felt a little bit at times like an industry therapy session, especially for the European operators. But of course, there were lots of technology and services developments, and we're going to discuss some of those today, Guy.
Yes, well, as you say, you never have enough time at MWC. There's always so much to see and so many people to talk to. Thanks very much, Ray. So on with today's show. And let's now meet our guests who are eager to help us figure out what exactly happened during MWC. And joining us live on the After Show are Juan Carlos Garcia, who is SVP Technology Innovation and Ecosystem at Telefonica. Azar Saeed, who is Senior Director, TME Technology and Strategy at Red Hat. Rolf Eberhardt, Head of Orchestration with the Communications Technology Group at HPE. And John Abraham, who is Principal Analyst with Appledore Research. Hello everyone, really good to see you all and welcome to the show to John. Now, as this is a special Spotlight on 5G programme, Ray is going to start us off with the $1 million question.
Oh, Guy, I think it might be the $1 trillion question. So the first topic for discussion today is the state of 5G. And the question is, how can 5G deliver on its promises? Was there anything from Mobile World Congress 2023 that made the industry more sure that 5G can deliver new revenues and a return on investment in the coming years? Really big topic, but it was a really big talking point at MWC last week. So Juan Carlos, maybe we can start with you. What was your sense from last year's show in Barcelona? Is there any more sense that there's more supporting applications and services for 5G that can help the users and the service providers?
Well, that's a good question, Ray. Well, we could see relevant progress during Mobile World Congress, especially when we have reached 1 billion 5G connections by the end of 2022. So something that we were probably missing in 5G, that is a scale we're getting there in terms of connections. We also could see a significant amount of things connected to 5G, so all kind of vehicles, drones, flying taxis, cars, robots, trains, and also a wide variety of devices, of 5G devices. So I think probably technology is ready, and this Mobile World Congress showed again how rich is the amount of features that 5G can deliver. But when it comes to solutions that really bring business and help monetize all the investment that 5G requires, So we see still on the enterprise probably the source where we see more the biggest amount of opportunities for revenues in the 5G private wireless arena on massive IoT for the industrial segment as well and other sectors. So we have been for many years already trialing all kind of use cases in many sectors, and you can see the potential there in labs like Fivetonic, our 5G co-creation lab we have in Madrid with partners like Ericsson, Comscope, Interdigital, Capgemini, University Carlos III in Madrid, and India Networks. So we have so many use cases along these last 5 years, and the potential is there. And we still see that the way we deliver things on 5G is on private environments and with dedicated infrastructure, and this is something fantastic. It's probably helping to use the full potential of 5G, but this is still a dedicated environment that not everyone can afford. Okay, so we are, delivering Ferraris, of 5G, and we see attempts, to try to commoditize these solutions. So we see. On one side, companies trying to bring the 5G network into a small box, others trying to deliver the 5G private wireless from the cloud close to the customer from the edge. And this will probably help massify the solutions on the private segment. But we still see the difficulty on the consumer side, with consumers still not willing to pay additional money for extra capabilities, even if the connectivity is fantastic and the capacity is growing. The willingness to pay still is not growing. We see probably appetite for new applications and services on top of the connectivity. And this means that probably to get to massive solutions on 5G, also for residential, we'll have to find new models of monetization. Okay, so the current one that is based on charging the end user, the consumer, is probably not a feasible one. And we'll have to find ways in which we partner with the application service developers to really monetize on these new opportunities on the consumer segment.
Thanks, Juan Carlos. Great insights to start the show. Rolf, let's come to you next.
Well, it fits pretty much what Juan was saying before. It's really enterprise offerings, private 5G. That's the name of the game. Telcos we've been speaking with say it's a clear win to bring services in this space into to customers. And then the next step will be I call them the specials. Stuff like gaming applications coming closer to the retail field. We didn't really hear too much about that. What we saw is that an interest in bringing dedicated edge applications closer to it. There's the key question is who is going to do the first step in investing on data centers around the edge? How are we going to get the applications closer to it? Let's hope that the industry can take a step forwards in 2023, but it's still pretty much now it's private 5G, get that stuff closer to enterprises, start the communication with the enterprise users on how to combine Wi-Fi and private 5G. And then from there on, new applications will emerge on their own.
Okay, thanks, Rolf. And John, let's come to you next. I'm sure you had many a conversation last week about the monetization of services and what the service providers need to do to help increase those margins and get some return on investment. What are your thoughts on this?
So, firstly, I think I agree broadly with what Juan Carlos and Rolf just said. But, across the floor at MWC, there are still a lot of concerns. On one hand, there are concerns about where the economy is heading, and that's obviously, causing concern for what might be the take-up for potentially new applications, be it on the consumer or the enterprise side. There are questions about what are the specific applications to focus on, and that varies by region. But in spite of all of these concerns, I think I saw a lot of green shoots. And by that I mean there was a lot more maturity in terms of the ecosystem. There is, be it on the network side or even on the software side, the entire BSSO is a stack. There seems to be a better acknowledgement of the challenges that lie ahead. We still don't have the latest, R18 release 18, which can still have some implications for some of the software design, for instance. But in spite of all that, there is still a lot more maturity. There's a lot more willingness to engage with the industry. That has been a challenge in the past. There were numerous booths with events specifically targeting developer community, again, just to bring them on board with specific types of enterprise use cases and so on. So broadly, I think the industry has moved on from where we were a year ago. Certainly Yuan's point about 1 billion connections certainly helped. But on top of that, to have all the key players come together and agree on different types of partnership models, have some sort of a reality in expectations, and all of that, I think, is greatly helping us. So this is still going to go forward at a steady pace rather than anything like a rocket ship, I think. But even then, I think it's quite encouraging to see all the green shoots, in terms of greater engagement and cooperation between the community.
Okay, fantastic. Well, green shoots, we'll take that. That's a positive. They don't tend to grow too quickly, but the end result can often be beautiful. That's what we're all hoping for. Azar, let's come up to you. What were you hearing? What were the discussions you were having around 5G?
No, very briefly, I think both Rolf and Juan covered, and I think John actually made a couple of good points. From our observations, we feel that the ecosystem is really maturing, and we've seen some proof points at MWC around that particular ecosystem, be it RAN, be it core. So far, and we've discussed this on our panel here in the past. That 5G was not about providing just consumer connectivity, but to date, 5G has been in the business of providing faster consumer connectivity. But 5G was all about, enterprise B2B. And I think you saw a lot of those demos and a lot of those companies interested in actually monetizing their enterprise B2B. So while it's not there yet in terms of realizing all those investments to create quote unquote an ROI model, the promise is there because the ecosystem is matured, the new applications are there, and some new use cases people are actually bringing up to say, how do we now take advantage of this connectivity that exists today and build a monetization model on it?
Yeah, absolutely. And we have to remember, you can't get a return until you've made the investment, and these investments are still going on. There's a lot of rollout to come and a lot of development to come. So I'm sure that the monetization and the evolution of 5G is still obviously going to be a massive topic next year and the years to follow there. Okay, so great start to the show. Thanks, everybody. Over to you, Guy, for our next talking point.
Yep, thanks very much, Ray. As we heard there, no rocket ships, which thankfully meant no Elon Musk at MWC this year, but we still had keynotes. And talking of keynotes, the GSMA used the day one opening keynote to launch its Open Gateway initiative. A lot of interest in this, so we'd like just to find out how important we think this initiative actually is, because there have been a number of similar attempts at this before. I'm thinking of the WAC, One API has been a few of them. So what makes this different? Is the timing right now? Why is now the time to really get behind this initiative? And could it really be a defining moment for network-based mobile apps development? John, perhaps we could start off by coming to you with your observations here and what your thoughts are of the Open Gateway initiative.
I tend to be quite optimistic about this particular initiative, and I'll admit that there is a fair degree of concern in the industry that are we ending up with far too many initiatives around API cooperation. And my view is that, by the way, a bit of background about the Open API, Open Gateway initiative here. Its genesis can actually be traced back to the Camara API initiative, which was launched exactly a year ago at 2022 MWC, and the main ambition with these API initiatives specifically is to target the enterprise. One of the, I would say, Achilles heels of the telco industry has been that we haven't been that great at talking the language of the enterprise. We can be quite good at solving or describing in great technical detail what we do from a technology stack perspective, but then translating that into a language that the enterprise can understand and connect to, in terms of solving a specific problem they have, or in terms of applying the technology or the networks to actually helping them, build up new revenue opportunities or business models. That has not been that great. And the ambition here is to try and address the opportunity with the enterprise by speaking the language of the enterprise. Obviously, when you go out into the enterprise, it doesn't help if there are different operators talking different languages, and that's why it makes sense to have one initiative, heralded by or headed by the GSMA to try and bring it all together. So overall, I think this is a very worthy ambition. I think it's backed by the right kind of people. I think we have over 20, nearly 22 operators in the mix, all the leading telcos there. And that itself translates to, I don't know how many millions of subscribers, but that's quite a significant chunk. And also we've got the support of many other ancillary players as well, be it from the vendor community, from the hyperscalers, and so on. So overall, the coming together of this partnership can actually help move the needle in terms of working much more closely with the enterprise. I do think that that we cannot just stop at announcing some of these things. We as I think you pointed out, we have had quite a few other initiatives. I think one of the fundamental things that's actually missing at this point, and maybe it's too early for that, is to try and how does the monetization of these things work? I mean, how do we make money of this? I think we have to be quite blunt at that. Not so much to go down into the pricing model itself, but just to have an acknowledgement that, yes, this has to be tied back to revenues. This is not just about making it easier for a third party to connect to a group of operators, but it has to have a much more clear path to monetization. And I think that's where we need to have some more clarity. I also observed, again, that much of the heavy lifting, at least in this initiative at this point, seems to be done, led by the operators, which is great. But it would also be good to have some of the vendors get involved, in terms of contributions and how it scales from here. And again, maybe it's a comment that's too early, given that we are still in the early days of this. But just calling out a couple of concerns there as well.
John, thanks very much for those observations and comments. Azar, we'll come to you in a second, but let's go to Juan Carlos first. Some good points made there about the ongoing need to monetize 5G, and we still need to think about how we monetize this and how we get the developers in. We've been talking on TelecomTV for a long time about trying to attract the developers into the network. What are your thoughts about this initiative, and why is the time right now to launch this?
Well, as I told you before, there needs to be a new business model, no? Especially when we try to address the consumer segment. No? Well, as my colleague said, this will boost probably applications for the enterprise segment, but for the consumer, I think we'll have to collaborate with the application service providers that are the ones that are at this moment growing in terms of new services and consumption by the end users. And this announcement is a very relevant to foster this new model. Probably it's one of the most important announcements that the telco industry has made in the last decades. Okay, there is not so common to see the agreement of more than 20 CEOs of the most relevant telcos agreeing on launching commercially a new standard service. In this case, services based on APIs, and with the intention to make them as universal as it is today, voice, messaging, or internet access. There has been only one agreement in the past similar to this. That was in 1987, the MOU for the GSM that gave rise to these universal mobile services that we know today. Okay, so we expect this to have a similar impact in terms of opportunities to grow in new services and opportunities not just for telcos, but for the whole ecosystem that is developing and delivering services on 5G. What is relevant in this case is that the initiative is not just an initiative of telecom operators. Okay, as John mentioned, this is already being worked for some time in the GSMA for more than 3 years. Very recently, last year, with the launch of Camara, and we are developing all this in communities where we have telecom operators, but also cloud providers, technology providers, device manufacturers, developer communities. So this is really an opportunity now that we have really to develop something new with a new model. And as a difference to the previous attempts, not in a closed group of telecom operators, but in a very wide ecosystem where we have not just the application, the API providers, but also the API consumers working together to design the portfolio of services. And this is what is really relevant. We have now an opportunity as well because the technology is helping us to do these kind of things. So we have now network technologies that are software-based. So we have the first cloud-native technology now being deployed. That is the 5G standalone core. That is one of the first that is offering the possibility to expose network capabilities to third parties. And I think this is bringing the opportunity today that probably we couldn't benefit from in the past. So we have better technology in the network. We have also more experience on the cloud and on amplification. Okay, because we have gone through a long process in the telecom industry to digitalize all our IT systems, and now is the time to take the network to the next step, that is making it become a digital platform that can provide digital services, the network as a service, basically.
Thanks, Juan Carlos. So it does sound like the stars are aligning at this moment to make this into a reality. Azar, I promised to come over to you for your thoughts here, because historically it's been incredibly difficult for the telecoms industry to attract the developers and really get them integrated with the capabilities of the network. What are your thoughts on the Open Gateway initiative?
I think the ambition is right, Guy. The ambition is absolutely right, and I agree with John on that comment there. But if you look at, just double click on that, what is that API and gateway initiative, Open Gateway initiative? GSMA has done some of this stuff before, the One API in the past, then Camara last year, and now Open Gateway this year. The traction for each one of those steps hasn't been as great in the past. Hopefully this time it might be better. But if you double click on what those APIs are for now, for example, there's a lot to do with edge. There's edge site selection routing. There is device location verification. There is quality on demand for IoT. Some rich media communication stuff, things such as device status, right? Now, these things are important if you really want to offer good edge services. So somebody up there in those telcos is thinking about, how do we monetize the infrastructure, which is what you started the first question with. And two, how do we now enable some of these capabilities and services through this edge conversation with 5G as the underpinning infrastructure for it, and then get that available for application developers, for the ecosystem partners, to be able to deliver new capabilities and new services. So I think the intention, the ambition is right. The proof will be in the pudding in terms of execution. I would have loved to see a little bit more on Camara as it was launched last year. There were some proof of concepts. I think the true test would be exactly how do you do settlements and billing associated with subscribers and or enterprise customers in this, to actually drive the success of it in terms of adoption.
Great, thanks, Azar. There's plenty for us to go on here. We'll be following this very closely in the months ahead. We really hope this leads somewhere positive. Well, in that case, Ray, we've still got a few more questions we want to get through here and areas you want to cover. So let me hand over to you.
Okay, thanks, Guy. And here's one on another of the massive topics, not only of the last week, but of the last year. Energy efficiency. This saw a lot of interest, a lot of talk at MWC this year. The question is, how can we build a broader, more energy efficient communications and cloud infrastructure that can support all of the services and apps that the industry is expecting to come down the pipe in the next few years? And how can smarter network management tools help with this? So, massive topic. Everybody's working on this. Everybody's looking at it. Azar, maybe we can start with you. How have things moved on? Is this a top of everybody's agenda now? Is there a lot more focus on this in the industry? And are things really moving on?
Thank you, Ray. We've started, as we start talking to more and more providers, we've learned some really interesting numbers here. Let me just share those numbers for you. 2% of countries' infrastructure goes into power. Countries' power consumption is used by telecom sector of that particular country, and 2% of that power also is consumed by data centers within that country. And this is actually, I'm just making a little bit 2 to 3%, and telecommunications actually uses 2 to 3% of global energy currently. So optimizations in terms of how we use better energy and how we do power management has become increasingly important, not just overall from a sustainability initiative, but also to drive costs down, right? I was talking to one of the providers and they said, our power bill is $1.3 billion with a B every year. If you save 10%, if you save 20% in that context, you should be able to drive significant cost reduction, significant costs out of that particular infrastructure. So that said, certainly it's at the top of the mind for sure. And, the most interesting thing from a radio network infrastructure standpoint is the radio access network uses most amount of energy when compared to, that's where more number of devices are and so on and so forth. Now, there were some very interesting demos at MWC this year, and some really good work that's happening. We actually happened to show one of them too, where you could actually do optimization of the servers to deliver about 20% savings by adjusting the frequency of the CPUs, by turning off cores when you don't use them, and by efficiently placing workloads in data centers that actually utilize power more efficiently. So you could do all of those techniques to do some level of optimization, but that's just not enough because we only play from a Red Hat perspective at the infrastructure layer. We do not play, applications also need to be optimized to be able to use that properly, because if the application is constantly just bugging the CPU along, then you're not going to save any energy from that particular system, from that particular server. So I think there's a lot more work to be done. The ecosystem really needs to come together. And there is a significant dent that we can create in the space together with the telcos to optimize it.
Yeah, we are talking, there's the carbon footprint, there's sustainability, and there is the reduction of costs, absolutely. And those are pretty massive figures. And I did actually see the demonstration you're talking about. It was some pretty smart stuff, I think, with a partner of yours from Turkey. So very interesting. And it's great to see that these things are going on and are going to be able to make a difference, and they're automated as well, and that's absolutely key. Rolf, let's come to you. What's happening in terms of the development of tools that can be used, either right now or in the very near future by the network operators, especially as they sort of migrate to more cloud native processes?
Mm. Well, so one thing which you can obviously do is get better hardware in, that's top activity on our side to bring more efficient hardware, in particular on the edge, as was mentioned before. The edge is sort of like the easy place to do the improvements, because you don't have the complexity of a large scale data center. If you are within a rack, everything within the top of rack switch is under your control, so it's a much easier environment to manage and optimize. And the levels of improvement are taking workload, bringing the workload, or improving workload managing, for example, radio parameters, so that you can then drive the application performance. That was what mentioned before. Then you can take from the application performance, you can go down to managing, for example, edge cores. So you can shutting down cores on it. And there's work being done in the open source by some of the chip suppliers, which we can then bring into it. But this is still all work in progress. The last area is using NFV to manage and optimize the placement of, for example, video VCUs, so that you then use less infrastructure depending on the workload performance. And for that, you need to have an end-to-end closed loop automation, so that you have an engine which can monitor and supervise usage, and then drive, for example, the NFV orchestrator to place network functions in a more optimal way. We're still at the very beginning, in my opinion. We'll definitely have a lot of improvement to do, and the energy crisis we've been through now the last 6-8 months will definitely incentivize everybody to invest in that space.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's clear that this is the top of a lot of companies' agendas, and I think the supply side. This isn't just happening now. There's been developments for years, and we saw quite a lot last year as well at Mobile World Congress, and again this year. There's some really clever R&D going on and developments, and I think we'll see a change in a lot of the infrastructure in the radio access network, not only in developing countries but in developed markets as well in the coming years. So very encouraging. Okay, so thanks for those comments now. Time is moving on. Time is going very quickly on today's show. So Guy, I'll hand over to you for the next question.
Yeah, thank you, Ray. Well, during our preview show, we not only covered energy efficiency, but we also asked if OpenRAN had actually missed the 5G rollout phase. Was there anything from this year's Barcelona show that made anyone on the panel here feel like advances have been made in OpenRAN, and specifically its carrier grade capabilities? Is there anything to convince more tier ones to come on board, and also to give more confidence to the tier twos and threes? Azar, perhaps we could just come to you first for comments.
Thank you, Guy. The ecosystem has certainly strengthened and matured, in my opinion. While it's absolutely true that some of the larger tier ones are, still working with the big RAN vendors and RAN providers, those RAN vendors and RAN providers, those big ones, are also now participating actively in the OpenRAN community. Right now, there are in front of us at least 3 different RFPs specifically around OpenRAN. So the only comment that I would make is, absolutely, do people want to do it? Yes. Do they see technology maturing and the hardware maturing, and the enablement of consumption of those particular hardware in a more cost-efficient way happening? The answer is absolutely yes to all of those questions. Have we seen the same pace in terms of what we had expected, let's say last year when we spoke about OpenRAN? Perhaps that pace is a little bit slower than I had anticipated. I think, we expect more deployments to happen this year, other than the few production networks that exist today from a Cloud RAN perspective, and then more OpenRAN conversations to actually happen this year, and probably some more productions next year. So that's, in a nutshell, what my observation is, and what we have seen also at MWC. Some very interesting, massive MIMO capabilities being shown, particularly with mixed vendor ecosystems, meaning someone else's radio, the RAN components is from a different vendor, and they're actually showcasing some capability, truly, realizing the vision of the OpenRAN environment not just cloudifying it or putting it on, virtualizing or containerizing it, but also now mixing and matching some of the components. I think for commercial deployments, we probably have another 12 to 18 months for those kind of things.
Yeah, thanks, Azana. So that's an interesting timescale you mentioned there. Now, during MWC, Ray spoke to a number of people involved in the OpenRAN Alliance work, and one of the takeaways I got from that was just the sheer amount of technical specifications that they're dealing with. I mean, it's a vast workload. Juan Carlos, can I come over to you for thoughts about the progress of OpenRAN? Because, even though there's a lot of work and work is really continuing on this, there is a window of opportunity, isn't there, that really has to meet?
Yeah, probably what we have seen in Mobile World Congress this year is probably the end of a phase of development of OpenRAN, where we have gone through testing, development, exploration, integration, and to get to a point today in which we have got to overcome some of the barriers we thought the technology could have at the beginning, no? Like, for instance, lack of maturity. We have seen that the technology is technically feasible and operating, no? Can be operated in more than 200 trials that have been made worldwide. No? We also had concerns about efficiency and security, and we have seen in this Mobile World Congress most of the operators addressing these topics and probably giving signs that we are getting to maturity there as well. We have seen a lot of support from tier one operators, as we mentioned. So probably big operators, have been experiencing for years, and now probably are better prepared now to give the step to come into the next level of deployment. But probably the situation we have today is one in which we need to go for the next wave of deployments and coming from these field trials to show the technology to massive deployments. No, this scale is probably where we are today, and what we have seen is that strong effort from these big operators that started this technology development. Telefonica was one of them, of course, but also important bodies like Telecom Infra Project and Alliance that are setting up now mechanisms to ensure that we have an environment in which both technology providers and operators gain confidence in this technology and can give the step to go to massive deployments. No? On one side, telecom operators will have now to do some work of collaboration to agree on requirements to be able to orient the developments of these technology providers to the right configurations to start the massive deployments. And on the other hand, we will need schemes in the market to test and certify and validate these solutions so that we can have a kind of certificate that can bring confidence not just to tier one operators but also to tier two and tier three to include these OpenRAN solutions in their procurement processes and hopefully in their deployments moving forward. I think there is now an opportunity in this second wave of 5G. Okay, so we have probably gone through the early stage till we have got these 1 billion customers in 5G, but now it comes, the moment in which we need to increase coverage and reach the rest of the population. And this is the opportunity for OpenRAN that needs to be solved now. Okay, so then it's important the work that these bodies are doing, Telecom Infra Project and OpenRAN Alliance, in creating this probably process that can give the confidence to the market to move forward.
Great, thanks very much, Juan Carlos, for those observations. And if I may give a quick plug for the very latest OpenRAN news, we have our monthly show, which is called, you've guessed it, the OpenRAN Show, and just join Ray in a few weeks' time for the next edition of that. Ray, I think we've probably got time for one more topic to cover off in this show, so let me hand across to you.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Guy, and we're swinging back specifically to 5G and the spotlight on 5G. Now, the evolution of 5G is proving to be a bigger challenge than many people thought. And as a result, there are plenty of naysayers out there, hence the conversations at MWC about where are we with 5G, can it deliver on its promises. Yeah, as we heard from several operators during MWC, we're still only in the first quarter of the expected 5G era. Now, is the 5G standalone core, the SA core, the key to fulfilling business services potential? And if so, how do we accelerate its deployment? Rolf, let's come to you first, because I know this is something you've been working on and talking about for quite a time already.
Yeah, so 5G standalone core as a service, that's what we should be having. And if I may point out, there were some interesting announcements at the show on operators going in this direction. So not having a fixed standalone somewhere in the pampa, but actually offering the ability to deploy an as a service core, sizing it up to the needs of the customer, and then typically fit for enterprise type services going into space. Combined with an as a service core is obviously the appropriate automation around it, because the efficient, let's put it this way, 5G isn't exactly what you call an easy to manage technology. If you're talking about a multi-vendor core, it gets even more complicated. And so automation, managing all the use cases in a zero-touch fashion is going to be absolutely essential for the future. So yes, going into as a service will be the key, because then you can start deploying infrastructures for enterprise services in an efficient way. That will be the alternative to having private 5G core as a service type deployments, small deployments as it is, and they will help us build solutions for the enterprise business in an efficient way, and hopefully path the way to the consumer type services which Juan Carlos was speaking about earlier in this show.
Okay, thanks, Rolf. I mean, that certainly, makes a lot of sense. I mean, more and more is becoming as a service now, and as the telecom platforms cloudify, then these kind of approaches will absolutely make sense to the customers as well as to the service providers. Okay, if we don't have any further points to make on the 5G SA core, Guy, I beg your pardon, I'm sorry, we'll come to John and then we'll go to Juan Carlos. So John, let's come over to you. Apologies.
I just wanted to add a point about the importance of 5G SA core, especially from a monetization perspective. The architecture that we have for standalone 5G is such that from a monetization perspective, and I think this is the really big deal that we need to start talking about more, it actually opens up a slew of opportunities that is just far more difficult in a pre-5G era. So what that means is, by definition, you have a monetization function, as per the 3GPP standards, that just sits just above where the core and the RAN is, and it's all interconnected. All these network elements, like the NWDAF, the network exposure functions, the AMF, the SMF, all of these are interconnected by predefined APIs in what is called a publish-subscribe mechanism, which essentially means any of these elements can share information with every other element. And this is quite a paradigm shift from the past, where we need to have and design point-to-point interconnections. So you can imagine how challenging that would be. Now, why is it important? Because what happens is this allows the operator to charge by a number of attributes which were unimaginable before. Like it can, by design, without any custom integrations, it can know how many streams of a particular show is being watched, or how many times is a particular application being opened, and so on. So I think, to answer the question that was asked, Ray, I think it's absolutely essential for standalone to be out there, before we see some more momentum in how quickly enterprise is being monetized.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and this is key. We do need to come back to this the monetization of everything. We need to follow the money in these progressions. And Juan Carlos, let's come to you for, I think, what will probably be the final word on today's show.
Yeah, well, I agree with the opinion of Rolf and also John. No? The 5G standalone core is opening the door to network as a service, no? to be able to offer network capabilities as a service, and was not possible with the previous technologies. And that is an important step forward, but not only for private wireless, not only for enterprise customers. As I said, it's also enable a new model to the consumer with the B2B to C segment, no? And this is very, very relevant. 5G standalone core also, brings as well capabilities that we didn't have in the past, like network slicing, and this is very relevant to customize the behavior of the network and fit it to the demands of the application and the customer. And finally, it brings also additional security mechanisms that we haven't seen in previous generations that increase the level of security in the network. No? And in this case, they are coming by design as a component in most of the modules that the core is bringing. No? So all in all, I think it's opening new capabilities for digital services.
Yeah, and that's a big learning curve as well, isn't it? There's new ways of learning, new tools to learn, and of course, at the end of the day, like we've said, this needs to translate as well over to the business side of the fence, and the operators as well. The service providers need to figure out how to market this and how to monetize it. So a lot of steps to take, but I think, as John mentioned earlier, in general, we're seeing green shoots on quite a few things, and certainly did in Barcelona last week. Okay, thanks everybody for those comments, and Guy, back over to you.
Yep, thanks very much, Ray. We are out of time for the programme today. Thank you so much to all of our guests who joined us for our live after show programme, and to our audience as well. Much appreciated.
Yeah, if you haven't yet watched our coverage of Mobile World Congress 2023, then there is plenty to view in our Spotlight on 5G series. We've got high-level CSP interviews, daily editions of The Slice, panel discussions, and much more. Check it out on the TelecomTV website and just follow the links.
So much content indeed, and please join us again later this month for our TelecomTV Summit on private 5G and the Edge, and that starts on Wednesday the 29th of March. Until then, thank you for watching and goodbye.
The after show was recorded in front of a live online audience.